All right, everyone. Bernie Sanders is being exposed as maybe a weaker candidate than some expected. I think that his fans had wanted him to stay in like the 20s, sort of like the natural runner-up to Joe Biden, and sort of within 5-10 points of him. Somewhere where if he does well at the first debate, and Biden probably won't do that well because he's the gaffe master, he could rise up and he could become a challenger. The Bernie Sanders wants to try to knock him out in Iowa. Because if he takes Iowa, he gets a boost, grabs New Hampshire almost certainly at that point. He becomes the presumptive nominee by the end of Super Tuesday if he holds on tight and manages to win 4 or 5 of those states. Because some of them will go to Warren or Harris. Potentially, they'll pick them off. Biden grabs the rest, but Sanders would be ahead. By the way, it's very, very funny. Someone was trying to lecture on a 4chan thread about a week ago about how supposedly I didn't know what I was talking about because the Democrats use proportional allocation of delegates. Fuck the delegates. Literally doesn't matter with the superdelegate system, as we saw years ago between Obama and Clinton. It doesn't even matter if you've won the most delegates. Technically, you can still get unseated in a close race. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that it is optics. If a politician in an election which is fundamentally for Democrats, this election is a referendum on Trump, and electability is the main issue on most people's minds. If a candidate, therefore, regardless of the delegate structure, has not won any of the first 4 states, it doesn't matter if they come in a close second and still cobble together more delegates potentially than any other single candidate. They're a fucking loser and they're going to lose. Because of optics, they will not be seen as electable. Nobody cares about the Democratic Party. The late Democrats don't understand that there is a delegate structure, probably. Most of these people are as fundamentally politically illiterate as any other randomly chosen group of people in the whole fucking world. They don't even know that the delegate system exists. They think whoever won the state is the winner of the state. They boil it down to that very simplistic factor. Again, perception, not reality, is what we're dealing with in politics. So I'm not going to go off on that. So I'll talk more at length than that some other time, maybe. But here's the thing. Bernie Sanders now is on ice almost. He's falling, and I'm not talking about like single polls. Don't bother worrying about them. I'm talking about the aggregated polls. If you look at RCP, if you look at the aggregate for the 2020 Democratic primaries, you'll see that initially Sanders and Biden had an interplay. If Biden was rising, Sanders dropped, and vice versa. Now he's got an interplay as well with Warren. This shows me, the fact that he's got these 2 separate interplays shows me he is the candidate in flux, and it's not in a positive direction for him. The problem is that if you look at the long-term trend, primarily he's faltering over time. That is that Warren and Harris have risen up a bit, Warren especially. She is now arguably within striking distance of being in second place. Now, in a race where Warren is a bit ahead of Sanders or vice versa, who wins? Biden. Because if he's got 30%, 35%, and nobody else even is hitting 20%, who the fuck do you think is going to win Iowa? And if you look at the Iowa polling, indeed, Biden has the edge there. And it's as simple as that. Now, Warren is in an enviable position. Because as you go into the debates, which will, begin happening, what could happen is Biden torpedoes his own campaign with a gaffe. Let's say Biden torpedoes his own campaign, loses 10 points of support. Whoever is in second place at the time grabs the electability Democrats that will flock to them. Because Biden having a gaffe, there are plenty of left-wing networks, the Voxes and CNNs, they're not really taken in by Biden. They're not too sure that they want him. They're willing to go for someone like Warren. You can see it. Vox has a total hard-on, a total stiffy for her. They think that she can win the election. Now, I can tell you that there's one big glaring reason why not, and that's the ethnicity issue. If you don't think that would haunt her in a campaign, or the fact that she has so visibly over the last 5 years changed from a standard liberal to a so-called progressive, and latched onto the furthest left suggestions. She latched onto the New Green Deal before it was, discovered to be totally bullshit. And so she'll have to explain that. She'll have to explain the flip-flopping, the change over time in her platform. She'll have to explain the electability issue with regards to lying about her ethnicity. She would have to make the case, as all Democrats do, that want this position, I'm the one that can beat Trump. That's basically what it's about for about a third of the voting public. Most of them want Biden. That's why when Biden went up there to about 40%, it was a flash in the pan. But here's the thing. I think 25-30 is his long-term floor. I think that's the number of Democrats, the business Dems and center leftists, that'll keep supporting him unless Buttigieg raises up. They're never going to support a Bernie Sanders platform. He's already burned that bridge by being an avowed socialist. They can't support Warren. She's latched onto too many far-left issues. Most of them probably don't even know who Kamala Harris is. She's sort of disappeared, and she's still stubbornly at 7, 8, maybe 9% in the polling. She has her own block that's totally different. I think that's Biden's floor. If the race stays packed, it doesn't matter what happens with Warren and Sanders. Biden will still end up becoming the nominee. And if you look at this, this looks a lot like what happened in 2016 with the Republicans. What happened? Trump rises up. He becomes the top candidate. Over and over again, I think it happened 5 different times. It happened with, who was it? The dude, Rick Perry, I think. Wasn't he in with him? Rubio, Cruz, and Ben Carson, actually. And briefly, almost with, what's her name there? The one that ran, what was HP? I can't even remember her name because she's a second-tier candidate. She did well at the little kitty debate, quickly rose up to 10 points, then promptly dropped like a rock. Each time, everyone said it's a new paradigm, this is the Trump replacement, this is the person who will beat him. No, he was stable at the top of his game, around 25 to 30% early on. He never even got above 50 till the very end of the race. But nobody else could challenge him. Towards the end, the problem is, the field was so packed for the first few states that he could win with 25-30% of the vote in some cases, because everything else was split among so many people. He had 2 major challengers, but he had about a half a dozen potentially viable challengers with 1 or 2% each that were eking away mainly at the other candidates, not at him as the front runner. He had his own solidified block, a long-term floor, which is what I tried to explain as early as New Hampshire, and people kept using the term low ceiling, which was never true. And you saw that. He cracked through that towards the end. When he was just running against Cruz and Rubio, he started to get up there in the voting totals. I believe that Biden, by virtue of this, if he can hold on in Iowa, and Sanders is his main contender there, trust me, and not Elizabethwarren with her policies. Elizabethwarren cannot contend with Joe Biden in Iowa unless there's a major shift in the race. Sanders can. He's got the grassroots, on-the-ground mechanism needed to stand up against Biden's corporate cash and backers within the DNC. He has 25,000 fucking volunteers. How many does Warren have? How much more money does Bernie Sanders have, again, with a total grassroots platform? He outstrips Warren. He outstrips anyone else. He's the only person I can see right now that can contend with Biden in Iowa. If Biden grabs up Iowa, he's going to run away with it almost certainly. He will probably become the nominee. His chance right now is like 80%. It would jump to 90 if he wins Iowa. And if he takes New Hampshire, it's a done deal. Unless he strokes out or has a major gaffe, before Super Tuesday or a major scandal or something, Biden would become the nominee. I don't think that Elizabethwarren, because of the issue of her ethnicity lying, because of the issue of her at the debate, she could get antagonized and go off kilter, I don't think she can make it. And if she did, by some virtue, win against Biden, I'm telling you she would get completely crushed in the general election. The Democrats are playing a very dangerous game by even entertaining the possibility of an Elizabethwarren run. Sanders would be more viable, arguably, in some cases. I think that she would win some states. I don't think she'd do well in Nevada. I don't think she'd do well in the Rust Belt. I definitely don't. I can't see her doing as well as even Clinton did in the Pacific Northwest. She could lose control of a place like Oregon, or certainly a place like New Mexico, because of the large Native American voting population. New Mexico and Nevada, 2 potentially vulnerable states. Trust me, Trump would love to pick off pieces of the Southwest. He'd rather hemorrhage Florida just for the victory of having eked back into a place like Nevada or New Mexico has been going more and more blue for 4 or 5 election cycles. He would get huge kudos from the Republicans for that. He doesn't give a fuck. Meanwhile, you look at the Rust Belt polling, Trump is way up against some of these people in a place like Michigan. He's doing very, very well indeed. But Bernie Sanders is a weak candidate. He's losing support to someone who is simply not really viable. That's about all. Peace out.